In 2006, a black swan who would later be nicknamed Petra was released onto the Arsee Lake in the German town of Münster, in the hopes that an exotic animal from halfway around the world would attract more visitors to the surrounding park. And Petra certainly did garner a lot of attention, far more than anyone could have predicted, when she became the centre of what I believe to be the greatest love story of all time. Arsee Lake is massive and sees plenty of boat activity, especially in the summer months. These range from jet skis to a full-on water bus and everything in between, including pedalos, which are apparently known in other countries as pedal boats and paddle boats. Whatever you call them, one thing that seems to be pretty universal is one of the most popular pedalo designs, the giant white swan. Even if you've never been in one, you've almost certainly seen them at least once in your life, and some of the pedalos on Arsee Lake were this exact kind. And given that this episode is our Valentine's Day special, I'm sure you can see where this is going. Yes, for Petra, it was love at first sight. She soon singled out one of these pedalos and started engaging in all the same courtship behaviours you'd see in a swan trying to woo an actual swan. She would swim around it in circles and spend hours lovingly gazing at it, making gentle crooning noises. And she didn't take kindly to anyone who tried coming too close to it. After all, that wasn't just some random pedal boat, that was her soulmate, the love of her life. And this wasn't just a passing fling. Swans mate for life and are well known for the strong bond and intense loyalty they have towards their partner, and Petra was no different. It didn't matter to her that her new lover was plastic inanimate and like 10 times her size. She was in love, and that was that. She followed it around all summer long and into the autumn, shunning the company of real swans in favour of her new love. Although there are resident populations of black swans in Germany, they're native to Australia, which obviously has a very different climate, and so a lot of the ones living in northern Europe migrate to warmer climes for the winter, since they're not really designed to withstand our much harsher winter weather. Petra should have done that too, but she refused to leave her mate, and so remained on the lake. Usually when it gets cold, a lot of the small recreational crafts, like the pedalos, would be removed from the lake, but the owner of this particular one just didn't have the heart to separate the unlikely soulmates. But Petra couldn't spend all winter on Arsee Lake. Not only would it have been too cold and exposed for her, but she also probably wouldn't have been able to feed herself. That's one of the major factors that cause black swans in Europe to migrate over winter, but Petra had the added complication that she wasn't really a wild swan. I mean, she technically was wild, but you wouldn't have guessed it from her behaviour. She was really tame and even friendly with humans, something which is incredibly rare for swans, as we all know. It's believed that Petra was probably hand-reared, hence her lack of fear of people and perhaps also her disinterest in her own species. But this tameness also meant that Petra didn't really know how to take care of herself. Like I said, she wasn't really wild, not functionally, and she wouldn't have been able to survive winter alone. Thankfully for Petra, though, the nearby Olvetter Zoo took pity on her and made a refuge for her to spend the colder months on a sheltered lake in their elephant enclosure. And because it was clearly very important for Petra's emotional well-being, they also took in the pedalo so the two wouldn't be separated. They spent all winter together, with Petra nesting in the hollow space under the pedalo, and once things warmed up again, Petra returned to Arsee Lake with her pedalo in tow. For Petra, the summer of 2007 was much the same as the previous year, with all her time being spent with her beloved pedalo. And that winter, when she once again chose to remain on the lake with it, the zoo once again took the two of them in. But then, that December, Petra's head was turned. A white male swan nicknamed Paul arrived on the scene, and Petra fell head over heels for him. They began courting and soon were building a nest together. Petra had forgotten all about her pedalo and seemed to only have eyes for the new man in her life. And when it became clear she'd moved on, zoo staff finally returned the pedalo to its owner. And only a week later, Paul dumped Petra. He flew off to join some other swans and just left her behind with an empty nest. And when I say that Petra was left heartbroken, that's not just me anthropomorphizing her. She was visibly agitated and clearly experiencing distress. So much so that as soon as they could, zoo staff took her back to the lake and reunited her with her ex, by which I mean the pedalo, not the philanderous Paul. And it seems that Petra was happy to rekindle things with her old flame. It may have been a giant lump of floating plastic, but I suppose one benefit of an inanimate object is that it can't break up with you. Petra remained on the lake, and though the initial international attention she'd received died down, she was still a beloved local celebrity. For a while you could buy Petra t-shirts and keyrings, and in the autumn of 2008 an official fan club was launched called the Friends of Black Petra. It had nearly 60 members at its peak, with some from as far afield as Chile and South America. In order to join the Friends of Black Petra Society, you had to pay a recurring annual fee of €12 a year. This went towards buying food for her since, like I said, she wasn't really very good at the whole being a wild animal thing. By 2009, the fan club had 58 members, so their annual fees would have added up to nearly €700. And not even a swan as beloved as Petra would be able to eat €700 worth of food in a year. So the society also provided her with a specially built wooden hut for shelter. And yet, despite all of the love and hospitality Petra was shown by her fan club, only a year after it was formed, she disappeared. Her fans were frantic, worried that she'd frozen to death or fallen prey to a fox. They printed over 150 posters and leaflets, which were distributed across Munster, pleading with people to report any possible sightings of her. They once received between 40 and 50 calls in a single day. Everyone was desperate to find Petra and make sure that she was safe. They were sure that she wouldn't be able to fend for herself over winter. They received several reports of a friendly black swan being spotted on a lake 100 kilometres away in the town of Xanten, and the fan club's spokesperson Reinhold Weins and local vet Rita Time, who knew Petra well, travelled there to confirm whether or not it was her, and from what I can tell, I don't think it was. For years, Petra's fans were left in the lurch, wondering what had become of their beloved bird and fearing the worst. Then, in early 2013, a swan matching her description was spotted on a lake 50-odd kilometres away in the town of Osnabrück. According to Jörg Adler, who was the director of Alta Verte Zoo and who had obviously gotten to know Petra while she was staying there, the white marking on this swan's beak was the same as Petra's, and it also had a bent toe that was identical to one of Petra's. So it seems pretty safe to assume that despite going missing for years, this swan was indeed her. And it seems Petra had once again found love. Not another pedalo this time, but an actual swan, and this one seems to have been far more faithful than Paul. The place Petra was living was described as a bird care centre, and apparently she seemed very happy there, with no interest in returning to Munster. And that was the last update I could find of her. I can only hope she was able to spend the rest of her life with her new partner, having finally found a mate who loved her back. Thank you so much for listening to this bonus Valentine special of the Animal Nerd podcast. If you enjoyed it, then it would mean the world to me if you could support the show in any way that you can, whether that's by sharing it with a friend, giving us a review or rating, or liking the video and leaving a comment if you're listening via YouTube. And of course, subscribing so that you never miss a future episode. I've got some really good episodes coming in the pipeline, trust me. And I know you're probably fed up with me saying this, but I always like to include it for the new people. Any and all money made through this podcast goes to Animal Sanctuary The Little Rescue Zoo. So by listening to and supporting this show, you're also helping to support animal rescue, which is pretty cool. If you want the sources used in this episode and all of that stuff, then you can find that in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay wild, friends!